What's going on, y'all? It's Monday night. Just got done, getting dinner and all that good stuff. And I was just thinking, I've never really done a good video on, diagnostic work, diagnostic strategies. Um, how I get started diagnosing an engine when it's running bad. I kind of make myself a checklist every time. Everybody is going to be different. But I kind of want to give you an idea of where I start and what I look for when I'm diagnosing an engine. When it's running poorly, or it's not starting. It's cranking, but it's not starting. It'll turn over, but it won't catch. So I kind of make myself a list, like this, and you can actually get charts online. Diagnostic charts. But three basic things an engine needs is it needs fuel, it needs air, and it needs spark. That's the three basic things it needs. Then it also needs compression. It needs to be able to rotate, like if it's locked up or something's broken. Excuse me. Good old allergies. But usually where I first start is, does it have fuel? Does it have spark? Does it have air? So first things first, you check it for spark. A couple ways you can do that. There's a little tool you can stick on the end of the spark plug and the spark plug wire, or on the coil, and then you can. There's like the ones I like using are the little cheapy ones. They're like there's a light inside of it. It's got two spark plug wires. A male and a female on one end, which that's kind of hard to do when you got these cylinder heads now that the spark plugs are down in the hole. But they actually do make a kit where they've got an extension. Stick that down in there, and then you plug that light tool in, and you plug the coil on it or the wire on it, whatever you have. Crank the engine over. Is that light really bright? Like, you want to put it on a good running engine so you know what a good spark is, and then put it on an engine that's not running so well, and it'll be a weak spark, like a dim light. They also make some that are like a little pointer that you can actually adjust the gap, how far that spark is actually jumping, and if it's a nice white blue spark, or if it's just a real weak orange spark, that's what you want to look for. More of the spark stuff, you want to look around. Do you got any cracked wires? Do you got any damaged wires going to the coils? Do you have any damaged coils? The next thing you want to do is pull the spark plugs out, look at the spark plugs, see if the electrode is worn down, or if it's rounded on both edges, or all the edges, but all the sides, sorry. That's indicative of a worn spark plug. A spark plug should be like squared off. A lot of times the edges will be really rounded off, and then you want to go look and see what the manufacturer's recommendation is for the gap. Check the gap. Say the gap's supposed to be 35 thousandths, and you're sticking a feeler gauge in there, and you're getting up to like 80 thousandths gap. Well, that plug is worn out. And that coil is not designed to jump that distance and have a good spark. Yeah, it'll jump it, but it's not a good spark. It's not a strong spark to ignite the fuel. Then the next thing I do is say, hey, yeah, I got good spark. All the coils are good. All the wires are good. All the wiring's good. Does it have fuel? An easy way to see if it's getting fuel or not. If it's cranking and not starting, you can take a vacuum line off, or pull the air inlet off, the air tubing off the throttle body or the carburetor, whatever it is. Shoot some starting fluid in there. Excuse me. Crank the engine. Does it start? If it starts, yeah, well, obviously we're not getting fuel. Well, why are we not getting fuel? Do we have low fuel pressure? You put a fuel pressure gauge on it. A lot of the newer cars, you can actually go in the data stream, look at the fuel rail pressure. Go look up the specifications. It's supposed to be 56 psi, and you've only got 38. Well, you don't have enough fuel pressure to even get through the injectors or open the injectors. Do we have no fuel? Sometimes you may have too much fuel. It's flooding out the plugs, which you would notice that That's why I like to check the plugs first. Plugs give you a lot of idea of what's going on inside the cylinder. If the plug is, if it's wet and it's, burnt black, pig black, but you're getting spark, well, there's probably too much fuel going in there and you're actually putting out the spark. You're not igniting the spark, you're not igniting the fuel. The combustion, it's not happening. You want to look for, a weak fuel pump, low pressure. You want to look for a restricted. If you've got low pressure, you want to look in the for a restrictive line. Like you've got a rusty fuel line. It's not leaking fuel, but a lot of times they'll suck air. Not really on most of your modern cars because the pump's a high pressure pump in the tank. You'll let leak fuel, but the old cars with the carburetors with the old fuel pump all the way in the front of the engine where it has to draw all the way down the fuel line. If that fuel line is rusty, it'll actually suck air in and not fuel. You want to see if, like I said, it's a fuel filter clog. Take the fuel filter off. You turn it upside down, nothing comes out. You turn it the other way. Fuel, dirty, nasty fuel runs out. Well, throw a fuel filter on there. See if that makes a difference. If it doesn't, then the fuel line's damaged. Like, did the car run over something on the highway? And I've seen this many times. Goes up, smashes the fuel line shut, smashes the return line shut, or the pressure line shut. You gotta look for things like that. So that's spark and that's fuel. What's the next thing it needs? It needs air. It has to have air. Engine is just an oversized air pump, pretty much is what it is. A lot of the first engines came from air compressors, and they just converted them to, powered diesel or power gas engine. So on the air side, you want to look for, is there a vacuum leak, which means it's getting too much air, which the engines run lean, which, a lot of times it won't start. Usually it will start, it'll just run like crap. It'll run lean, it'll misfire, backfire, ping. Do you have a restriction in the air? Meaning, do you have a dirty air filter, like super clogged air filter? All the ducting that comes off of the throttle body goes to the air cleaner, and then the air cleaner out into usually they go out into the fender. And I can't tell you how many times the ducting from the bottom of the air filter goes down through the fender, out to the fresh air. And there's birds' nests in there. The car got hit in the front end. It smashed the fender into the air inlet, smashed the air inlet shut. I mean, crazy things you're seeing, mud caked in there. The thing sucked up a bunch of water. It's frozen. I mean, I've seen some crazy stuff. So yeah, that's your air port. Does it have any vacuum leaks? Broken vacuum lines, damaged vacuum lines, missing vacuum lines, fuel deteriorated vacuum lines. Go to the throttle body. Is the throttle body even opening or closing? A lot of these electrical throttle bodies or electronic throttle bodies, the motors will go bad in them. One of the first things I ever do with a car when it's not running well or not running at all, I pull the air inlet off. A lot of times these throttle bodies will just be caked with, carbon, just dirty, filthy. A lot of them are just stuck. Open that dude up, spray it out with some throttle body cleaner, carburetor cleaner, brake cleaner, whatever you can get your hands on. Spray it on a towel, scrub it out, hold the butterfly open with a screwdriver, scrub that guy out, switch sides. A lot of guys get a toothbrush in there and they clean it out. I really don't like using toothbrush because I'm kind of paranoid about the bristles coming off or dropping it down in the cup, in the intake port. I don't like doing that, but get that thing clean, because believe it or not, I have had cars with rich running conditions because the throttle body is so caked, because it's supposed to be open slightly and letting a little bit of air in at idle, and if all that carbon's built up around the the little bit of part that it opens like this, so up here, if it's all carboned up and it's supposed to have a little bit of a gap, well, that carbon's built up, then there's no gap, so there's no air getting in, so it'll be run rich. And like I said, that's one of the three key components is air. So I always, anytime I'm doing even any maintenance like a tune-up or anything, I clean that throttle plate, man. That's probably 85% of the time you have drivability issues, it's a dirty throttle plate. I mean, honestly, I learned it the hard way. Um, but man, it was like a guy I used to work with, super good technician, super good electrician, and I was like man, it's got this, it's running rich, and it's just acting really weird. It's not idling really good, and I checked all the sensors. The oxygen sensors are good. The throttle position sensor's good. Everything's within spec. And he would just look at me like, "Did you clean the throttle plates?" No. Go and clean the throttle plates. Man, these things run like a champ. I will warn you, a lot of the cars, especially the Toyotas, when you do that, you have to relearn the throttle plate position. You have to relearn the idle for the closed throttle position because it changes the angle of it. They get all pissed off and they won't run right. So you got to remember that. You got to go in and relearn. Usually it's some weird thing like you hold the throttle open with your finger and have your buddy turn the key on. And then you turn it off, and you let go of it, and then you start it, and then it relearns. But a lot of the throttle positions you can relearn with the scan tool nowadays. So once you get past that, then you have to start looking at mechanical problems like, does it, well, not, that's, no, here's another, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Another part of the airflow is, the intake going into the engine. Well, then you got to get it out. You got to get it out through the exhaust. That's all one flow. If you've got the in, but you don't have the out, well, you're not going to have the in because you've got a restriction. So you want to check your exhaust, make sure you don't have any restrictions. You've got a plugged up catalytic converter, or you've got a pipe damaged. I've seen pipes collapse. I've seen muffler baffles break inside the muffler and collapse and block the flow. So that's another part of your airflow. You've got to have the entrance, and you got to have the exit. So check your exhaust for damage, check your muffler for damage, see if your catalytic converter is not clogged up. Excuse me. A lot of the times when you do have a damaged catalytic converter, it's because of something else. It's running poor, it's running rich, it clogs up the substrate, the little honeycomb holes in there. You're burning coolant, you're burning oil, all those things are factored into clogging up a catalytic converter. 9 times out of 10, they just don't clog up themselves unless they're overheated, or they have a foreign, material running through them that's not supposed to be running through them besides hot air, the exhaust. And then you start getting into the mechanical part of it. If it's running bad, you've got a miss oil on one cylinder. You've checked the coil's working good. The injector's working good. Oh, I got ahead of myself. Another vacuum leak where the injectors go into the intake manifold or the cylinder head. There's an O-ring at the bottom of them. A lot of times those things will dry out and they'll crack, and that'll create a vacuum leak. Good way to look for a vacuum leak. Either you can use your ear or you can use a scan tool. Best way is go in with a scan tool. Go into your long-term, short-term fuel trim or your oxygen sensor readings. If you spray down the intake track, on each side where the intake meets the cylinder head, spray one side, wait a few seconds, nothing changes, spray the other side, and then all of a sudden, woo, the RPMs come up, the fuel trim goes up because you're introducing hydrocarbons into that area. And then you can kind of pinpoint it like, ooh, I'll spray this injector, this injector, this injector, this injector, which you're actually spraying the intake port too. So that'll kind of narrow it down. But if you've got a misfire on a modern car, it's going to tell you what cylinder it is. So it's cylinder 5. Well, I'm going to go spray cylinder 5 injector. Well, that didn't change, and I'm going to spray the intake around cylinder 5. RPMs come up. You got a vacuum leak. If you spray that injector, that O-ring is leaking. So that's the fuel and air part of that misfire code that you're getting. Say you are getting a misfire code, misfire cylinder 5. So you spray it down, you're getting nothing. You spray the O-ring, you spray the intake, you're getting nothing. Still misfiring. 2 things you can do. You can get the old school vacuum gauge out. You can hook the vacuum gauge up, and if that thing's, it should be a steady vacuum. But if that gauge is just flitter, you've got some mechanical issues. You've got a valve not seated. You've got a bent valve. You've got a worn guide. An extreme cases you've got a broken piston ring or you've even got a broken piston. Um, that's the things you got to look out for. A vacuum gauge is another very, very good diagnostic tool. I'm going to go into that in a whole other episode. I could do a whole episode on vacuum gauge, on tuning and diagnostics and troubleshooting. That's a whole different other tool. It's an old school tool. Back when cars used to have these guys carburetors on them, that's when I learned how to work on stuff. So we're going to go into that in more depth about we can adjust air fuel ratio on a carburetor with a vacuum gauge. We can see if we got a bent valve, if we've got a vacuum leak. It's a whole. I can go on for an hour about how to use a vacuum gauge. It's an inexpensive tool, but it's a very useful tool. So let's see. So it was a worn guide. Okay. So that's all your mechanical problems. Excuse me. Another mechanical issue you can have with the valves, and I've seen this a lot on the direct injected engines, is valve coking, or the very high carbon buildup on the valves. Especially, I'm not pointing any fingers or anything, but the GM 3.6s. I know it's because it's a really popular engine. It's a really good engine. It does have its quirks, timing chain issues, but the main thing that we run into on those is what they call valve coking. So, say you got a miss on cylinder number 5, spark's good, fuel's good, air's good, still missing. Pull the upper intake plenum off, or actually you got to pull the upper and the lower off. Oh, wait a minute, I don't remember how those are. Yeah, you just pull the whole intake off. Well, you pull the upper off, then you pull the lower off. Look down in that cylinder 5. They got 2 little intake valves and 2 little exhaust valves. Man, you look down those valves and they will just be coal black, caked up with carbon. And the carbon is built up so much as, the valve has a seat that it goes on. And it's so caked up that valve is actually lifted up, so you actually have, and you'll see a compression loss in it too, because it can't it can't hold the cylinder closed. It doesn't have good compression because those valves are being hung open at all times. They do make a special product to clean those. General Motors has some that you soak it. CRC makes a really good one. Soak those valves down. Blow as much of it blow as much of it as you can out. I'm speaking way too fast. Crank the engine over, blow it out, put it back together. I've had numerous problems with misfires on these. Not just the GM one, but all the directed injected engines. We've had issues with the valve coking on them. Just like I said, General Motors one, I'm pointing fingers at it because it's the most common one I work on, but they all have that issue. Any direct injected engine is going to have that issue. So that's another mechanical issue that you can run into. And the next thing is, looking for damaged wiring to your sensors. Is the oxygen sensor damaged from the engine running bad? Is it damaged from outside, damage like running over something? Are the wires chewed through from some critter? Do you have a bad mass airflow or a dirty mass airflow? Mass airflows do get dirty, especially when guys are using these oil-based air filters. I'm not going to name names, but the ones you clean up and spray with the oil. That oil goes through the filter. It gets right on the mass airflow sensor. They're no bueno. When I bought my truck, I opened it up and it had one of these, name brand 2-liter air filters on it. I took it out and I threw that thing right in the trash. I know they're $50 or whatever, but I don't care. I know how much problems they cause. Just get a good, paper media filter and put back in there. A lot of guys, if you want to clean them every month, go ahead, but they're not good for the system. That sensor is not made to read oil. It's made to read air and temperature. So yeah, if you've got a mass airflow problem, not caused by that, caused by damage, caused by critters chewing the wires, just dirty in general. You'll see a bunch of fuzzy stuff on it from the air filter, even the paper air filters. Clean that guy off with some brake clean or some carburetor cleaner, whatever you got, blow it out. Makes a world of difference. Do you have a damaged throttle position sensor or a worn out one? Or you can ohm chest a lot of these sensors. Back to the critter thing, these wiring on these cars is made out of organic material, and critters just think it's food. They eat it because the manufacturers were made to use this organic material because it's non-toxic. Well, they think it's food. They chew stuff up all the time. So Is your throttle body motor bad, or is your throttle body, the pedal sensor bad? I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But just basic, diagnostic strategy, and you can Google a sheet that will tell you how to, go down the line, check it out, boom, 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 and you'll be a more accurate diagnostic technician. You'll be a happier technician. Your boss will be happier because you're not throwing parts at it, and the customer will be happy because you're only charging them one time and you're fixing it. So that's my diagnostic video. So I appreciate y'all watching. If you would please like and subscribe my videos, it would help us out a lot. But I just want to help y'all learn how to work on stuff, how to diagnose stuff. So get out there and fix something. Peace out.